Today's webinar is on the topic of the emergence of solar mobility. So we have two underlying trends in Switzerland and globally, and that is the rapid deployment of solar PV enabled by unprecedented cost reductions that far exceed the forecasts year by year. And second, we have electromobility, the exponential growth of electric vehicles that have reached a tipping point. In the Consumer Barometer of Renewable Energies that will be published on the 3rd of November, we asked a representative sample of the Swiss population about their renewable energy preferences. And we find that 23% of the Swiss population want to buy an electric vehicle in the next 5 years and 11% in the next 3 years. So this number illustrates the strong power of electromobility and why this topic is of interest. Today, we want to discuss how these two trends, solar PV and electric vehicles, complement each other and interact with each other. For this, we have some great speakers here today. First, we have my colleague, Professor Merla Kubli, who is hosting this webinar with me together, also at the University of St.Gallen. Then we have Arina Anisie, who is joining us from the International Renewable Energy Agency. We have Dominik Müller from Sun2Wheel. Also, Sabrina Milli, my colleague from the University of St.Gallen, is in charge of the shed. Note that this webinar is recorded and will be uploaded on YouTube. Please turn off your cameras during the input presentation. If you have any questions, you can raise them either using the chat function at any time, or also in the end, you can join us in the interactive discussion and directly raise your questions to our guest speakers. Yeah, today's webinar has 3 input presentations. The first presentation by Professor Merla Kubli on EV driver preferences for solar mobility. Then Arina Anisie will talk more broadly about innovations for smart electrification of mobility. And Dominik Müller looks at electromobility and bidirectional charging, presenting the case of Sun2Wheel here in Switzerland. Afterwards, we will engage in the interactive discussion. And lastly, we will finish with an outlook on the next webinar on net zero universities. So now I hand over to Professor Merla Kubli. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan, and good morning also from my side. It's my pleasure to co-host this webinar together with Stefan. My name is Merla Kubli. I'm an assistant professor at the University of St.Gallen and focus my research on business models and consumer preferences for renewable energy as well as electric mobility. In this short introduction, I will introduce you to the topic of solar mobility by shedding a particular focus on EV driver preferences. So looking at the trend of electric mobility, as that was also already nicely highlighted by my colleague Stefan, we see a massive increase of electrical vehicles. And of course, electrical vehicles want to be charged too. So what we see on this graph here is that also the public charging points as well as private charging points globally have shown a massive increase, reaching a level of up to 1.3 million charging points. Also, when we look at the map of Switzerland on the bottom right, we see that the map actually is getting relatively full with all the public charging stations being installed. Up to date, we have reached roughly 9,200 charging points available for the public, and this number is expected to increase in the future. Of course, when we have these trends in mind, on one hand, the increase of electrical mobility as well as the charging that comes along with it, we are aware that in the future, this is expected to come not without challenges for the electricity supply system. While studies find that the impact of smart charging on a national level is not expected to be very dramatic, as the study suggests, you can see it here in the green line, actually the additional peak demand is expected to not increase that much through EV charging as compared, for instance, to the peaks arising in winter from, in particular, heat pumps. However, when we then look at the regional scale, the picture actually looks quite a bit different, where we see here in red quite a massive increase of the charging demand, increasing the overall load profile that is put on the grid. What becomes evident here is also that the EV charging demand adds on top to a situation where we already have a high demand in the electricity grid, which then further stresses this particular moment to ensure that in this moment the grid stability can be ensured. The solutions for this all center around what is often called broadly smart charging. Smart charging describes the process of intelligently controlling the charging process using the information on the status of the grid. So if there is an overload or undersupply, but also using the information we have on the user demand and their typical behavioral pattern. So by applying smart charging, we can smoothen the peaks arising from EV charging, and ideally also shift the charging to less frequent times or even times of over supply. One particular form which is relevant for us today is of course also solar charging, essentially describing the situation where you charge your electrical vehicle when the sun shines. This model has the benefit of allowing double peak smoothing by synchronizing the EV charging peak together in the situation of when we have the feed-in peak from the production of solar power. And at the same time, solar charging models ensure that electrical vehicles are charged with renewable power, ensuring that it's actually a beneficial or a sustainable solution for mobility overall. Of course, to implement such solutions, various components are relevant. I would like to take the opportunity to shed a focus here on the user perspective, as the participation of EV drivers is certainly key to widespread smart charging as well as solar charging. So what do we know about user preferences to participate in smart charging? There are 3 instances where smart charging can be initiated with the consumers. The first would be at the moment of when the person decides to buy the electrical vehicles. And what we know there from the literature is actually users quite like the idea of having an electrical vehicle with the capability to smart charge or even do bi-directional charging. However, when they're then confronted with concrete contracts, they're a bit less excited about that. So it seems we have not found the ideal solution to motivate EV drivers to become part of smart charging schemes at the moment of the EV purchase. So that's certainly a field where more research and development is needed. The situation looks a bit more promising when we try to initiate smart charging through the electricity contract. And I would like to share some insights from a study conducted at our institute together with Moritz Lock and Rolf Wissenhagen. We here compared the consumers' willingness to co-create flexibility in different situations. We looked at owners of solar PV plus home storage batteries, electrical vehicle owners, as well as heat pump owners. And we look at situations where they provide comparable amounts of flexibility. We actually find that EV drivers are a promising segment to provide flexibility through smart charging, as their perceived cost of discomfort are not as high as, for instance, the heat pump owners, where impact on their room temperature might occur and would reduce the comfort. Then thirdly, of course, it's also an option to introduce smart charging also right at the moment of charging. And for this, we conducted also a choice experiment, essentially following the research question to what extent EV drivers are willing to adjust the charging location, the charging duration, as well as the charging mode in exchange for lower charging costs. So we put EV drivers into a particular situation where they had to choose among different charging options. That's different among the location, charging cost, duration, as well as the guaranteed range ensured after half of the charging duration. So in case they would depart early, that factor described to what extent their EV was already charged. What we found looking at how EV drivers made the decision to choose one charging option over the other, we saw that actually the most relevant factor deciding for which option they choose was in the end the charging cost, which you can see on the upper graph, having the highest importance factor for charging costs. Also, the charging location was quite relevant. What you see here, and that is highlighted on the bottom left, that there's a particularly high preference for charging at home, even though a person would be passing at work, at a public charging station, it's still always preferred to charge at home. So there's really a perceived bonus in home charging. The charging duration didn't appear to be very relevant as long as people could ensure using their time effectively in the meantime. And then what is interesting is the guaranteed range after 50% of the charging duration revealed that there is a relatively small difference in preferences between a comfort mode that ensured full priority to their EV being charged as fast as possible versus a standard mode that leveled the charging process to some extent, but still ensured that after half of the charging time, also half of the range is already ensured. But the standard mode already allows some level of smart charging, giving, for instance, the grid operator or third provider to moderate the charging process. On the other hand, what you described as the eco mode, where only 5% of the range was ensured after half of the charging duration, the preference really reduced. But of course, that would be an option to really maximize the application of smart charging. So to ensure that people would be accepted, a higher compensation would be needed. So what we conclude from this short introduction is that actually from the side of the EV drivers, there's indeed a willingness to participate in smart as well as solar charging if the conditions are favorable. And of course, what results from that is also that several designs for smart and solar charging solutions are possible, and they can be initiated in different ways. So in that respect, it will be particularly interesting to learn about the trends that are evolving and the best practices emerging in this field. And for that, we are certainly looking forward to the presentation by Arina and Anisie from IRENA. And then on the other hand, of course, the user perspective is one side, but we also need to have functioning business models to establish smart charging. And in that respect, it's certainly fascinating to learn from early moving startups, such as Sun2Wheel, where we'll hear more from our guest speaker, Dominik Müller. And with that, I would like to hand over back to my colleague, Stefan.
Thank you very much. I will quickly put on my slide again. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Wonderful. So our next speaker is Arina Anisie. She is a renewable energy analyst in the innovation team at the International Renewable Energy Agency in Bonn. She is the lead author of the Innovation Landscape Report that features the 30 most important innovations for the integration of renewable energy. Currently, she is working on innovations for smart end sector electrification, So her focus is a little bit broader than just power to mobility, because she also focuses on power to heat and power to hydrogen. She has been working at IRENA for almost 5 years. And prior to that, she worked as an energy consultant in Rio de Janeiro. Arina, the stage is yours.
Hello, everyone. And thank you very much, Stefan, for the introduction. And thank you, Merla, also for setting the scene greatly for my presentation. And of course, thanks for having me here today to present a little bit of our work at IRENA on this topic. You should be able to see my screen now.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So as Stefan already mentioned, I will focus today on innovation for smart electrification of mobility. IRENA is an international renewable energy agency that has 164 member countries, and this is more and more a very important topic for our member countries, because electrification, it's one with renewables, it's one of the main solutions for decarbonizing energy sector and including mobility. To take a step back and see a little bit, the big numbers and what is the situation in decarbonizing this sector. I have here some numbers. They're from 2016, but these are the most recent we have, but they might be slightly increased. But this graph just shows us that we have just 3% of renewable share in final energy use in transport. And in order to reach Paris Agreement and to be aligned with climate targets by 2050, we need to reach 56%. And when we look at electricity specifically, in 2016, we had 1% of electricity share in final use in transport. Again, today might be slightly higher, but we need much more. By 2050, we need to reach 43%. So as you can see, this is a very important and emerging solution and urgent solution for worldwide, for most countries. And we are offering advice and support on how to smartly electrify the mobility sector, using as much as possible renewables on one hand, and also minimizing the impact all this load will have on the power system, so smart charging. Here are another estimations of the growth of electric vehicle between 2010 and 2050 to be aligned with Paris Agreement scenario. Today, we have roughly 6 million passenger electric cars on the road, and we have to reach more than 1 billion by 2050. Again, a lot has to be done. These are worldwide numbers, global numbers. And also, it's very important and interesting to mention that our analysis suggests that by 2050, potential storage capacity that can provide grid services from electric vehicles, it would be around 50 terawatt hour. And this is much higher than the potential storage capacity that would be provided by stationary batteries, utility scale and decentralized. So that would be roughly 16 terawatt hour. So we see from this that the uptake of electric vehicles could be called the bank battery of the future. There will be so many batteries connected to the grid. We just need to charge them smartly and manage them smartly in order to be able to provide grid services and to facilitate also to be charged with more renewables. Merla has already talked about smart charging and what are the impacts and benefits of smart charging. I would like just to present you here a little bit how the flexibility can vary from an electric vehicle that is connected to the grid according to the different smart charging types. From very simple smart charging approaches like time of use tariffs without any kind of automatic control. There is a flexibility that the electric vehicles could provide to the grid, but this flexibility would increase as much as the more advanced and solutions can be adopted, such as basic control or automated control, unidirectional or bidirectional, where the car is also injecting electricity in the grid, vehicle to grid, as we called, or even dynamic pricing with automatic control. It is important to keep in mind that there should be a balance between the complexity of the smart charging that we need to adopt, and also between the complexity to implement the smart charging and the flexibility that the electric vehicles can provide. In some situation, just the time of use tariff pricing would be enough. In other power systems, in other contexts, we would need to go for a more advanced smart charging solution. We have been talking with DSOs with the DSO in Hamburg, Stromnetz Hamburg, who has been shared with us the experience they had with smart charging and with deployment of electric vehicles in Hamburg. And according to their study, they see that only at 9% electric vehicle share, so around 60,000 electric vehicles in the city of Hamburg, would cause bottlenecks, congestions in 15% of the feeders in cities distribution network. And how they could solve this, and they assessed two different solutions. On one hand, they looked at how much it will cost to reinforce the grid to be able to accommodate this number of electric vehicles, and they concluded that it would be roughly 20 million euros for all the work that has to be done. On the other hand, they also talked to Siemens, and they analyzed what would be the smart digital solution. This would be only to 2 million euros, so only 10% of the cost of reinforcing the grid, and would imply basically to decrease simultaneously. So all charging points would need to be visible by the DSO, and a real-time communication system needs to be in place to enable DSO to reduce charging points, to reduce the loads of the charging points when needed to avoid congestion. So you can see here a clear example from a DSO of what is the importance of smart charging and how much cost-effective it is to manage this electric vehicles load in a smart way. So I would like now to introduce to you the concept of systemic innovation, which looks not only at innovations in technology, but also innovations in other dimensions that are needed in order to have a real solution. What I'm saying here is that we have innovation in technology. Electric vehicles are now emerging, and they are accessible. However, we need innovation also in system operation. In the example from Hamburg, for example, the DSO need to start thinking of how to operate smartly the system and to integrate this increasing share of electric vehicles. But there is the question on how to monetize the value created, and they need to have incentives and innovations in market design in order to incentivize them to manage smartly the electric vehicles instead of just reinforcing the grid. So we need also innovation in market design, time of use tariffs and different incentives in order to allow the flexible behavior of the assets connected to the grid. This would create business cases and further innovation in business models that would enable new technologies, new revenue for technology streams, and would further enable the deployment of electric vehicles. Sometimes when the innovations in market design are lacking, private sector could identify business opportunities for directly. However, what I want to say here that synergies between all these innovations in all these dimensions are needed to have in this case a smart charging strategy. We need not only innovation in technology, but also to look at the system operation side, at market design, and what business models are in place. And currently we are having this exercise, and it's an ongoing study that will be published early next year, that we are looking how to apply systemic innovation for smart electrification of mobility, and to raise awareness among the governments and to advise policymakers to what are the important innovations that they have to keep in mind to have a smart electrification strategy for their city, for their country. And here we have mapped the innovation that we consider key for a smart electrification of mobility. And just to go very quickly through them, one dimension is technology and infrastructure. We need innovation in electric vehicles, of course, and in batteries. Very important, innovate in charging infrastructure, deployment of charging infrastructure to be sure that the diversity and ubiquity of charging points can facilitate the deployment of electric vehicles, and also different types of charging infrastructure could be also taken into account, like wireless charging, overhead charging, and so on, depending on what exactly we are trying to electrify, what kind of vehicles. Digitalization, it's very important because it basically enables automation of smart charging and facilitates much more the fast response and behavior of the charging of the car. And digitalization is important for EV charging apps, digitalization of smart charging and when to inject electricity in the grid, when to consume. And also it enables different business models and platforms for shared mobility that could also help deploy. And of course, there are some innovations that are also need to happen on the power system side to enable much more connection points with the charging points. Then we shall not neglect the importance of the innovations in market design and regulation that are most important to send the right signals and to send the right incentives for flexible behavior. And here we look at what innovation could appear on the wholesale power market, how the TSO could enable smart charging of electric vehicles, and also what are the grid balance services that can be offered by electric vehicles. On the retail power market, time of use tariffs or dynamic tariffs, and what the DSO can do to enable smart charging. And on the regulation side and then charging infrastructure, of course, there is the issue of permitting and different vehicle to grid regulatory framework for interconnections that should be mapped. System planning and operation are also very important. The system planning, we are looking at innovations such as cooperation of regulatory agency. Smart charging of electric vehicles is basically the intersection of transport sector and electricity sector. There are two sectors that used to be very independent, and now they should cooperate much more and plan together the deployment of electric vehicles in cities, in countries. And also transparency of grid data is more and more important to make sure that the charging points are placed in the best locations. And on the system operation side, again, the management of electric vehicles load from the system operators in order to integrate as much possible variable renewable electricity, solar mobility, solar charging, as Merla was mentioning before, and also how to charge to defer grid upgrades. Electric vehicles can also be seen as a resiliency solution in some cases, due to the batteries that are connected to the grid. And of course, business model side, it's also very important. We are looking here at aggregators to bundle electric vehicles and sell services to the grid, how electric vehicles load can find synergy with different distributed energy resources, such as rooftop solar panels, for example. On the transport system, on the transport side, there are different business models as well emerging, like energy as a service, mobility as a service, battery swapping can be some of them mentioned, and also public charging station ownership and public charging station ownership and operation are also some innovations that have to be, some issues that have to be taken care of as models to enable deployment. So this is just a little bit some of the innovations in these categories that we are looking at and we are trying to map to identify the key one that should be taken into account to have a smart electrification strategy for mobility. Here, we have been looking at California's electrification strategy that is quite advanced, and we have been looking at exactly what innovation they have been implementing in these 4 dimensions: on technology side, on system operation and planning, market design, and business models in their strategy. I don't think I will have time in this presentation to go very in depth into this, but again, just to map for you and to emphasize the importance of having innovation in all 4 dimensions for a smart electrification strategy. So they are looking in California, they have already started deployment of electric vehicles and also have quite a number of charging points in place, public public chargers, home charging, and also a well-deployed plan to deploy more charging points. On batteries and battery recycle, they also have a center that are looking at advanced battery recycling and how to recycle this battery to reduce waste. It's also an important innovation for decreasing the environmental impact. And on digitalization, there is a very interesting project from BMW piloting the charge forward system architecture. This is how the system works. It's very interesting, where a driver plugs in, the vehicle telematics system sends its current state of charge to BMW. And then the BMW system considers the driver's future mobility needs. So whatever the driver's input from its smartphone, considers the energy prices and current grid and renewable energy condition according to the data from the utility. And it optimizes how is best to charge the car given at the lowest cost and highest renewable energy. Then on the system operation and planning, what is very interesting, what they have in California is that they have a vehicle grid integration working group that brings together different entities and regulators from transport sector and electricity sector to plan the deployment of electric vehicles in the state. On the management of on system operation and on the management of electric vehicles to integrate renewables, this application that I was talking about from BMW actually takes into account renewables and decides to shift charging during the late morning hours that can help with oversupply of solar generation in the state of California. There is also another utility who is looking into how to manage electric vehicles load to differ grid upgrades and is purchasing distribution capacity for either generation or load. And electric vehicles can also participate in this in bidding. And given the heat waves they have been suffering, also they are looking into how electric vehicles can serve as a resiliency solution when they have wildfires and blackouts in the system. On the market design and regulation, they also change the grid codes to enable vehicle to grid charging in the state. Nuve, a company, is looking at vehicle to grid integration of electric vehicles, meaning that they are seeing how electric vehicles can participate in California's wholesale energy markets to help balance the grid. And also, of course, they have time of use tariffs in place to send the price signals to the consumers when it's best to charge. So you see how many innovations come together to have a smart electrification strategy. Finally, on business models, again, one business model is from this BMW charge forward application that create an average of $325 estimated grid savings annually per vehicle in California. So just per vehicle. This is important. They are also looking at battery second life to see what they do with how the batteries can also support the grid and be reused in solar and microgrid projects after they can no longer serve the mobility sector. And also how to deploy and who is the owners and operator of public charging points in the cities and the state. Lastly, I would like to show to you some results of smart charging in California, and yeah, what is the difference that they've seen between non-smart charging and smart charging. And BMW's Charge Forward program finished the second phase of tested, and they released a report where they highlight that smart charging can enable electric vehicles to accept an additional of 1,200 kilowatt-hour of renewable energy per vehicle per year. Also, smart charging have the ability to reduce greenhouse gas emission by an additional 32% on average in Northern California due to using more renewables, charging with renewables. And also the estimated grid savings annually per vehicle is quite high. And in this graph, you can see here on the average load, how the average load can be smoothened out with vehicle to grid. So I will end my presentation here. I just leave you a few of IRENA materials if you want to dive deeper in these topics, but
yes.
the new study will be available next year. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Arina, for this very content-rich presentation. Unfortunately, we are a lot behind the time currently, so I will quickly go over to the next presentation and our next speaker. So our next speaker is Dominik Müller from St.Gallen. He has an engineering background, extensive experience in the solar industry. He founded various solar companies, including Solvatech, and he joined St.Gallen a year ago, where he is spearheading sales, convincing customers to invest in these innovative charging solutions. Dominik Müller, thank you very much that you're here. The stage is yours. Please also note that we have a lot of questions in the chat, so we are trying to also do the discussion in the end. So I would like to ask you to try to stick to the time and finish maybe within 7 minutes, if that's okay.
Okay, I will try my very best. Okay, I think you have to start my screen because it doesn't work here.
Yes.
Okay, no, I think it's still not shared by Arina, as possible. Or I tried again. Now it's better. Yeah, okay. So I have to.
Von Beginn an the left.
Yeah, genau. So I'm back again. So it seems to work. Thank you. So thank you also from my side that I have the opportunity to give here to bring my points from St.Gallen as a supplier of such systems. I try to give you some insight in the possibilities and the benefits our customers could have, and also the benefits we could bring to the utilities, to the DOS sector. We just heard about some points during the last presentation, so I wanted just to take the point on the special challenges we are working on. The electrical cars, as mentioned, are over 90% of time not driving around, they are standing around. And with them we have really large and powerful batteries. And on the other side, we know all about the destabilization of the grid because of solar and wind feeding in. So the solution is the modular and quick installation of charging stations, which is one of our targets. We want to use the car battery for not only for storing electricity, we want also to give with the converters we use enough power to the grid, so to supply load, negative and positive load, to stabilize it. So we are using our system to peak shaving and ancillary grid services. Our ecosystem should be or is looked at, we are looking at our ecosystem as a hub for sector coupling, and around electromobility, the electromobiles should be an important point of the sector coupling. So we are working, if we look at the battery cycle, we want to, of course, to close as much as possible. And the points 2 to 4 are the points we are working on. So using the battery in the cars for grid stabilizing, for optimization for solar electricity, for example, and also for grid stabilization. And after having the batteries below a certain density, energy density, they still can be used as second use batteries in the buildings, in the infrastructures. We all know about the exponential market share growth of electrical cars, and this is of course the base of our model. And after all, we want to cover the V2, all the vehicle to issues as vehicle to home, vehicle to building. The vehicle to grid has to be done as a next step. Just to have a little bit an overview. We are working behind and before the meter. We concentrate in the moment in the sector vehicle to home and vehicle to building, behind the meter, where we can use our systems. But the next step has to be vehicle to grid, not only in theories, but also in the practice. But in the moment, to be honest, with the practical issues, practically we can't, it's still not allowed by the often by the utilities to feed back from batteries into the grid. So this point has to be changed. Why is this possible? Well, the most important point, of course, is that the batteries are ready for that in the cars. We have a lot of experience now, also from older batteries, and we know now that we have not more than 10% loss of capacity with batteries after 250 to 300,000 kilometers. So also talking about new technologies in battery, 1.5 million, 1 million mile batteries, for example. There's nobody will drive around 1.5 million kilometers. So the floor is ready to use the batteries technically for V2G issues. And looking at the consumption in buildings, we see the difference to the positive difference to the size of the batteries in the cars. If you look at one family domestic house, we had about 10 to 15 kilowatt hours electricity consumption per day. Even the smallest cars, electrical cars today, have the 2 to 3 times more capacity, and the biggest one 10 times more. So we have a lot of capacity on the place when the cars are parked beside the buildings, and it's functioning. So after all, with Japanese car models, electric car models, it's functioning already. We also had the opportunity together with Honda to make a system functioning with the CCS ports. So we are working through the DC ports, CHAdeMO and CCS, to go to the batteries directly to charge and discharge them. With a new ISO norm coming in the next year, it will be possible for every car model, every car product, every car type, and this will be the next steps we have to do. Our products are seen as a building, so the PV system is the roof, and our load management and app is the base of it, and we need one of the 3 shown columns to carry the roof, let's say. So the most simple one, of course, the monodirectional charging, the intelligent charging of an electric car. Then as a possibility, we see, of course, the battery storage. We prefer here the second use batteries out of the cars, and then the bidirectional using of cars with our bidirectional charging station will be the optimum. And this is our product family. We are working with two bidirectional charging station types. A simpler one, the two-way digital without any display, because we will be operated by our new developed app. Then we have the two-way 10, which can also be used in public parking places. Then we have our monodirectional station. We have second use batteries, which can also be implemented in our system. And then it's also possible to integrate in our system fast charging system, DC systems. The digital was published in September, so it's just freshly on the market, and we have now the first systems which are delivered to our customers. The most important thing of our system after the charging stations, of course, is our app. So we are able to give the customer, the clients, the possibilities to define for every single day which percentage of state of charge of his battery he wants to have. So he can make his own plan for using the car battery for the building. There are also echo and boosting modes. So if the plans have to be changed, he's always also able to change this by our app. Who has the benefits of our system? Of course, we are concentrating now on the transformer circles in the grid level 7, in the lowest grid level, where we are able to optimize the self-consumption of solar power, also to cut loading in the grid, in the buildings itself, in the grid of the buildings also, and to optimize the power, the loads, and the energy in the lowest levels. Also, it's possible to have the same opportunities in the upper grid levels. So we are concentrating on the DSO and on the consumer possibilities today. So we start at 0.5 now, and 0.4 now. We have the interconnection to the self-consumption we can optimize. We have the possibility to flex, to give car owners the possibility to use their batteries for optimizing self-consumption models. Then we have, of course, also possibilities with DSOs and utilities. I don't want to focus in the moment. Could this be profitable? This is one, of course, of the most important things. If you start business, we concentrate now on apartment buildings and SMEs, small and medium enterprises, also to have the opportunity to cover fleets. So we gave managers of fleets, logistics and energy the possibility to optimize their system, and at the end, but it's always a possibility also to give the employees and car drivers, car owners the possibility to override such management, such systems. Then we have the system which can also optimize the energy consumption in the buildings, after all, in combination with PV systems. And we can also manage the load tariffs in reducing those by peak shaving, for example, which can be really a very important point for our clients. The TCO term, the TCO is a very important point we'd like to point out. So if we are looking at fleets, we see that the old fossil fleets are, of course, lower in the investment costs, but in the running costs we have the highest TCO. If we look at the electric fleets, with the charging infrastructure, we have a little bit more investment. This will be changing, I'm sure. This will change in the next years. And we have, of course, the lower running costs, so the TCO is better. And if we combine solar systems with V2X, V2Gs, for sure, V2 building, we can optimize that again and give perhaps in the future the opportunity to have negative TCO. So at the end, we have lower costs than in the beginning. So this is a point we want really to concentrate at for our clients. We have one pilot project with the administration, with the federal administration, together with mobility and with EVTech. EVTech is producing our charging stations, and the focus is on optimization of the charging behavior, the vehicle-to-grid usage of shared vehicles. So we have to combine the reservation system with our charging and load management system. And this is really an interesting issue we are working on, and we will do in the next 12 months to roll this out. So there will be a concentration on buildings at one side, building integrated systems, but also public or half-public integrated system with utilities to have here this rolling out as part of the rolling out of mobility towards electrical cars. Some little mind game going back to the potential we have with this. Looking at just for Switzerland, we know that the Federal Council has defined that we need for winter consumption 2 TWh more by 2040. The point is that we have now in a power pump and generator power of storage power, of pumped storage power plants of about 2.5 gigawatts and 1.5 terawatt hours, which can be stored in form of pumped water. And if you look at these numbers, we see that about 6% of the 4.7 million cars we have today in Switzerland can manage this power on the grid. So we have with our stations the possibility to trigger the grid with plus to minus 10 kilowatts. This can even be improved. We are working on stations with plus minus 20 kilowatt, and this could cover a lot more for the triggering for the flexibilization of the grid. So we see this is just a mind game, but we could see really electrical cars together with PV systems to cover a big part of the consumption in summertime and also during spring and autumn. And we could really switch the power and the energy which we stored in the water, in the hydro plants, they can be used in wintertime, during wintertime. So this is a mind game. It's not being realized. We are not on the direction to realize that, but it can be a possibility we could think about. And we have also partner thinking about using our systems together with administrations here in the canton of Bern and with enterprises. This mobile station is just now in the canton of Bern, showing what possibilities our system has to optimize consumption of solar electricity with cars and with the grid of the buildings, and also this is the point. I hope I have used not too much time for that, and I'm looking forward to the answers by our students here. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dominik, for your insightful presentation. So